just given you here is a little reference sheet to use in today's class. So it's just got some of the numbers that we're going to be aiming for down the bottom. And also there's a little quick guide up the top just to remind you of what's actually affecting extraction speed as well. So the way this works, you'll see that we've listed 3 things there which changes the way the coffee flows out. And we've already worked on 2 of them today. So one would be the dose. What did we discover about dose in today's session? How does that affect the extraction speed?
If it's too fine, it'll come out very slow. If it's too coarse, it'll come out faster.
Oh yeah, sure. So like with your grind, see? Yep, that's what you'll find.
Yeah, so what were you said dose?
The dose. Yeah, so we figured out before that if you use a lot of coffee...
I've had too much coffee.
No, you're right. That's right. Tripping. So yeah, a lot of coffee, we're going to get slower shots. A little bit of coffee, we're going to get faster shots. But what happened just then when I adjusted your grind setting? You probably got high doses. Did anyone get a high dose?
Yeah.
Check your hand out.
Yeah.
Beautiful. What sort of doses did you get? So your grinder was giving you 21 from the button push. What did that change to when I adjusted your grind?
22.4 to 22.
Couple of grams more.
Yeah, see, ended up with 23, 24 grams. It's a fair bit. So there's a couple of things happening there. We'll kind of go into a bit of depth of that, but did anyone notice that despite those high doses, the shots poured relatively quick? Yeah, okay, cool. So this is where things get a little bit confusing for some people, and that's kind of why we're going into so much depth today, to show you that all these things interact. And it's actually a combination of your dose, your temp, and then your grind setting that could dictate how fast or how slow that water can travel through the coffee. Okay, there's all sorts of other qualitative things in there that make coffee taste better and behave a little bit better, but they're the 3 main things that we like to start with when we show people. So you'll notice you've got a few things on the extraction speed chart there. As far as keeping consistent or not consistent, we tell people to keep their dose consistent, keep their temp consistent, and then if they want to affect how things are pouring, if it's too fast or too slow, then they adjust their grind setting. And that's what we're going to go into a little bit of depth with now. So what I might do is actually just grab you something to take a look at first. Pass one around from this side, so there's 2 parts to that. Pass one around from this side. So what I'm passing you here are the blades from inside your rover grinder. So I'll just draw this grinder up on the board here. So you guys would have already seen this in operation by now. The way it works, we put hot coffee on top, and it travels down through this little chute. We've got our little cut-off thing there. But then it travels down through this part here called the grind collar. And that's the part I've come along and I've adjusted. Now the grind collar is connected to that bigger part of the burr set. So the largest set of blades just here is actually directly connected to that, that grind collar. So when I twist it one way or another, what it's doing is raising the height of those blades, or it's pushing them closer together. So there's a spring in there that always wants to push it up. And when I do that, when I go move these blades apart, I'm making the particles coarser. So there's more space there, so you're going to get bigger particles ground up. And the coffee can also travel through a little bit quicker. So you're going to grind more coffee in a shorter amount of time. So does that kind of make sense to you guys now? This is the reason why you are using a standardized time, but more coffee out when you push that button. It can be a little bit confusing. We actually get the same effect on a manual grinder. So if you're ever using one of those, you'll find you grind coffee much faster, but we're not used to noticing that effect because obviously you dose the coffee after, you don't get it straight from the grinder itself. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need to know about. The burr set and how it's sitting in here affects the quality of the grind, so how big or how small it is, and it affects how fast we grind things up. So I'll put that there as a little reminder for you guys. Beautiful. So the next thing that happens is inside here, there's kind of like a little spinning wheel. So if we looked at it from top down, there's like, kind of looks like this. If I could draw properly, this would be really great. It's actually a little bit tighter than that. So it just looks like that. And all the coffee gets dropped down on top of that spinning set of wheels just here, and then it's pushed down a chute. And we can actually get around about 3 shots of coffee that's pre-ground inside the grinder, sitting in there, and then that gets funneled out once that little bit's full. So what do you think that means for us? If we've always got 3 to maybe 3.5 shots of coffee ground up inside the grinder, how does that affect us during the day when you're making coffee in the cafe?
If you adjust the grind, it's going to have a couple of shots before you actually see the effects of your change.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things here. We have, there's a lag. So that's for like making grind adjustments. Absolutely, it's going to take about 3 shots to get most of that grind out, and then it takes about 5 shots to really get all of it out. So the way this works, once the coffee is dumped on top, it's continually cycling it around. So it's not like a smooth transition taking the coffee, putting it out. It gets put into a central unit, redistributed, and then pushed out because you're grinding more coffee. So that means we're never really getting kind of like shots on demand, as it might seem. We're always kind of working with that. So although this is maybe a little bit easier to get consistency with than a manual grinder is, we just need to be aware of that. What's the other part of this that's important to be aware of?
Dosing consistently.
Dosing consistently. How does that work?
Because if it's spinning around, there might be
Yep.
air pockets. It might
Yeah.
not. Yeah, so even though
Yep.
it's on a time basis, it might. There's not it's not weight.
Yeah, exactly. So this is that can create some inconsistencies for us. It's not weight based; it's volume based inside there. And if we haven't used the grinder at the start of the day and we put coffee through, and that chamber isn't full, we kind of get underdose shots. So the consistency of our dose is reliant on that chamber being full. So there's a bit of a lag with consistency. So at the start of the day, what we generally do is run through about 5 shots of coffee total. And that's to get rid of any old grinds that might be stuck in here. It's to get the machine warmed up. And you need to do that before you start making grind adjustments, just to make sure that what we're getting in here is a good representation of where the grind is at. So the other one that we haven't mentioned yet is freshness. This is a big one. If we haven't used the grinder for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, the next couple of shots that we get out of it are going to be with coffee that's been sitting there for a little while. It's also not going to dose as consistently as we want, because that stuff is kind of clumped up, it's let out all of its oil, it's not going to move out at the same rate. So it's usually after about a shot or 2 when we start going back to how things were looking before. So the last thing we want to do is jump on a machine that we haven't used for a little while and then instantly make a grind adjustment. We actually kind of want to give it some time and wait and make sure that we've cycled that coffee through before we decide to adjust some of our brew parameters. And the reason I say that is that'll stop you chasing your tail. You can make fewer adjustments during the day if you understand those concepts.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How often would you recommend trying to clean out that chamber, like weekly? Because sometimes I find that
Yeah.
over a long period of time, like obviously things do get clumped up.
Yeah, they do.
And I'm like, oh, I just got to stop and turn everything off and crack it all the
Yeah, I
coffee
know.
out.
We do it every day.
Oh, okay, do you?
Yeah, we vacuum it out every day.
Okay.
But you can also get plungers. Like if you take the hopper off at the end of the day, you can go spits out all the
okay.
coffee.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely if you can clean that out as often as possible, that's a really good thing to do. And then when you get your grinder service, we take it apart, we clean it out in a lot of detail as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Any questions about that? It kind of makes sense to you guys?
So you're talking about the beans that are left sitting in there when you take your hopper out? Take those beans out? Is that what?
We're actually right now talking about cleaning out inside the grinder. So the
Yeah.
part that fills up and then pushes the coffee out when you ask it to grind for you,
Okay.
emptying that, all the coffee in there and finding
So
a way
is
to do
that
that.
just by pressing the buttons to let all the coffee come out, or there's still coffee in there once you press
yeah,
that?
there's still coffee
So you can
inside.
actually get to that, can you, to clean it out?
You can. So like I was just saying, a plunger or a vacuum.
Vacuum cleaner, okay.
I'll show you at the end of the day. It's the most
Right.
satisfying thing.
Okay.
Nerdily satisfying. I really like doing it.
Yeah, that's right.
You guys love it. So this is pretty much it, and then so that stuff is all hidden inside the grinder, and then of course on the front of our grinder we've got this cone shape, and that's where the coffee's being dosed. So it gets dropped out from there, and it falls straight down here. It's obviously a bit more narrow than that, and then we've got our controls on top that we use to activate it as well. So you guys should now know roughly how to adjust those.
So just a question, this is probably
Yeah.
a really silly question. You said you do it on a daily basis, you
Mhm.
vacuum it out. why wouldn't you just leave it there because you're going to season the next morning?
Yeah, that's a good question. The reason that I don't like to leave it in there is because
Yeah.
it's always leaching oils.
Right, okay.
And over time, like you get these things called fines when you grind up coffee. So you guys probably already know this. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail in a sec. But these bursts here, they're not perfect. So they grind up coffee and give us a variety of sizes of coffee. That's just the way the coffee breaks up during the grinding process. It's quite brittle, so it shatters. So you get some big particles, some really small ones in with the same grind.
Okay.
And those really small ones don't get removed from the grinder. They typically stay in there unless we vacuum it out or
Right,
clean
okay.
it. apart.
So they don't build up. Right, okay.
And that actually, over time, creates some really bad flavours in your coffee.
Ah, yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, yeah.
alright.
So that's the reason we clean it out
yeah.
daily.
Yeah.
Right, so makes sense to you guys. That's how the grinder works,
Yeah.
inside and out. And it probably makes maybe a bit more sense now why I'd say that programming this is the very last step. You need to get your grind setting right as well, because if you do set this to give you the right dose and your grind isn't right, when you make a grind adjustment, you're just going to have to readjust that as well. So the best thing to do at the start of the day is manually adjust like we've been doing, get that 21 grams or whatever your target is in your cafe. That can change depending on your basket size. And then run your shots, and then we'd use some of those other numbers just down the bottom there to decide about our grind change. And this is where I'll tell you a bit more information about that. So far we've worked on a couple of things to try and standardise our extractions. We've worked on dose, and right now I've got you guys aiming for 21 grams. Now if you remember, the reason we're using that number is because we've got baskets that that number really suits. So for you guys in your cafes, you need to know what your basket size is, and then you'll find an ideal amount of coffee that works for that. You might have bigger, you might have smaller. We can also dose up to 24 in these if we wanted to, but this is just a good target. It's a starting point for us. Now, the other thing we've standardised is our tamp. And what I've got everyone doing at the moment is a firm tamp. Generally, the higher you dose, the more softly you'd like to tamp. And the reason for that is the more coffee we've got in there, the harder it is for that water to saturate the coffee evenly. So with a low dose like this, it makes sense to go firm. So we get a bit of resistance, and then we get better extraction behaviour as a result. So these are the two things we've standardised so far. The next one is going to be grind. And grind has a very simple effect on coffee. If it's finer, it tends to create more resistance, and if it's coarser, it creates less resistance. And the more resistance we've got, the harder it is for water to get through. There's a good way to remember that interaction. You guys may have heard this example before, but if we've got two buckets, one filled with rocks, one filled with sand, and we tip a glass of water on the top at the same time, which one of these wins the race in getting water from top to bottom? The rocks, yeah. And it's kind of the same with our grind. This would be representative of coarse particles. This would be representative of fine particles. So how do we assess if our extractions are behaving more like rocks or sand? What have we done today to establish whether something's fast or slow? How would you know?
The speed.
The speed. So we can just look at it, we can assess it. What would tell us if it was too fine? Be slow, be drippy, might be really dark for a long time, and vice versa, it'd be really gushy if it was too coarse. Now that only really works if we've standardised our dose, because we can slow down our shot by adding in more coffee. So what we're doing with you guys today is removing these things as variables, so we can just assess how fine or how coarse our coffee is, and then we'll use a measurement to make an assessment about how much to adjust it to correct it. Does that make sense to you guys as well? Beautiful. So there's some other things we now start doing. We're going to be timing our extractions. And we're going to go for somewhere, what have I got down there? No, I should say
27 to 30.
27 to 30. So that's a good range to aim for. Okay, that amount of contact time is, it's pretty much an industry standard for shots. You guys okay?
Sorry, no, I just did something really funny. So
Oh, okay.
I looked at the time, I thought, let's just grab that time.
No, all right.
I'll go like this.
Oh no, that's not pointed at you. You
Okay,
know,
maybe it's not pointed at me.
there is no evidence of that. Besides telling me right now, like no evidence at all.
Oh no.
So this, as I was saying, it's just a good time for getting a sufficient coffee extraction. So that amount of time with coffee and water being in contact will remove a lot of material from the coffee. And it'll generally work with something else that we'll be measuring, the beverage weight or the weight of our espresso. If we pair that with our dose, what we'll be doing is standardizing our strength, and then the time becomes a way to control how much content we're extracting. So a shorter amount of time with those things standardized gives us less extraction, and a longer time gives us more. So what would you get with less extraction, flavour-wise, and what would you get with more? What did we get in those 4 cups earlier? What was more extraction like?
More body, more sweetness.
Other way around, right? So the more we extract, the closer we got to the end of that extraction, the more bitter stuff came out. And that stuff, it isn't really that bad in coffee. It actually might work really well for milk coffee to have it run slow and get some more stuff out like that. If we are serving black coffee, we want it to be a bit lighter bodied, and we want it, we don't want so much of that back end note. We might opt for the slightly faster time. So you get a lower extraction from the coffee and more palatable flavours. So this is just something I want you guys to work with. If you fall within that range, you'll be getting good results. But obviously we can tweak the grind as well to get results that are suited for whatever coffee we're using at the same time. Right, so this is maybe a little bit complicated. We have a system now for measuring and weighing. I want to run you through that, and then I'm going to get you to take some measurements, and then we'll come together and I'll show you how to use those measurements to make a grind adjustment. So if you'd like to join me over at the machines right now, I'll take you through those things. Just twist the camera. Where are we? Just there. Yeah. Okay, this is where the second set of scales is going to come out. Now we're now going to use that to weigh our beverage. So what we need to do here is prep everything before we start. We start with the glass just on there. Make sure that's teared off as well. We're going to be weighing our espresso with that. And then we go through the same procedure you've already been using to achieve that 21 grams. Now again, if we didn't have scales in this scenario, how do you think you'd go about doing something similar? What would be some of the measurements you'd use instead of weight? So if we weren't going to weigh our dose, we already kind of went through that, we use volume. But what about with our shots up here? What would you do if you weren't weighing?
Oh, we could be able to show us before that's going out. So white measures or?
Yeah, so like the quantity. So I mean that's been the industry standard for a long time is millage. Like we can definitely say how much coffee we're getting out based on that. I guess the difficulty with that is the amount of crema makes it look like we've got a little bit more or a little bit less. So we can still use mils for testing, it's a good guideline, but this is just a little bit more accurate. So either way it's gonna work out. And what's the industry standard for mils for a single shot? About 30 mils, so 25 to 30. It's pretty acceptable. So for us, because we're working with weight, we can be a little bit more accurate. We're going to go for 36 grams for a double shot. So what I've done here is adjust this to be within 0.2 of a gram of that 21. We're at 21.2. Dose. And what I'm going to do here is start my extraction, and I'm going to start a timer at the same time. So you've got a timer on this set of scales. We've also got a timer on this set of scales. And what I want you to do is run your extraction all the way to your target time. So what's the target time we're aiming for right now? Yeah, 27. So let's all go for 28, just to standardise this across a few different machines. So all I do here is stop it, bang on the mark, boom, stop that at 28. Now the amount of liquid that's coming out here is the important part that we want to know. So right now I'm getting 51 grams of liquid out. So how does it compare to the target? Yeah, we're a little bit off, exactly. So we're about like 14, 15 grams higher than we need to be. And that's the number I want you guys to come back to me with. So go away, do a bit of testing, get that 21 grams in, stop your shot at the target time, 28 seconds, and then come back with that number. And that number translates directly into a grind adjustment up here. So
Would that help with that'd be need more beans now, wouldn't it?
that's going to be needing more beans? Yeah, I'll grab some. Cool, alright, so I'll give you 2 minutes just to get that done. We just need one shot from the machine. So you guys, if you just want to retest it.
Yeah.
Just for fun. This is where you start to see how different everyone's hand is.
Yes. Yes. Very people always use a different than I.
Yeah.
Nice to jump on. Does it matter which one I'm doing? Oh,
It does.
okay.
As long as we end up between them,
Yes, okay.
we'll be. This is one of my singles. The thing that you're using, so when you get up to that,
Yes.
probably need to make grinders.
Yeah.
That's fine. So if you want to distribute and sweep a little bit of that out, so guys, once you've got one shot from a machine, that's we've got a number from it. That's what we want. Really push down. So maybe you tend to come up. See how you want to slide onto the bench. You want your arms to come up. That's it. Now you should be able to push down. So try to apply. Yeah, try to apply something. Try to lean on.
Okay, so,
That's how it should feel.
to read.
I'll hold that button now.
So, okay. Do manual, was it?
Yep, let's start the time at the same time.
28 seconds. Yeah, that is good. That's it. Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, stop it. I reckon you're going to go this quite high. Thank you, mate.
55 out.
Right. It's very good. You can use these if you like.
Yep.
How did you go?
Yep, 59.
Too far.
Yep,
Yeah, so obviously taking
yep.
That's okay. How are you guys going? Have you got any number?
Just one shot.
Is that right? Yes.
Okay.
Need
Yeah.
that result once. As well. And I really like to count it. Should we stop your shot at the same time? Check the weight. 85. Wow. Ooh, yeah, this is going to be, I think. I don't know if I adjusted you that much. Might have a soft hand. Who knows? So yeah, let's talk about how to adjust this. So there's a few things here. Like you guys, because you're all going to be tamping different ways, are also going to find that if you're working with a partner, you're going to get different results on the scale just down here. So this is a good opportunity for a group of people to calibrate what they do. Obviously we need scales or something to get it exact, but at least if you're getting some disparity between two people, you can say who's tamping harder, who's softer, and find a big point with that. Now here's how you translate that number that you just got into a grind adjustment. Really, really simply, we measure our grind adjustments using that little notch on the grinder and these notches on the grind collar. So you can count how many notches you're moving around when you twist this wheel. If we go counterclockwise, we're going finer. If we go clockwise, we're going coarser. So what sort of adjustments do we need to make to our grinders? Is it too fast, too slow? Too fast, yeah. Beautiful, yeah. So we need to get finer. Now the question is by how much? Every notch that you move this grinder will change that number by 10. So if you're getting 46 grams out and you want 36, 1 notch finer up here should get it spot on, just like that. On the same token, half a notch is 5 grams, quarter of a notch is 2.5. You can get that in depth with it, but remember that because we're working loosely with targets here, as long as you're in the ballpark, you'll be okay. So the things you should try to get as consistent as possible are the dose there and the beverage weight that comes out. And to do that, we use the volumetrics and the volumetrics on here as well. So how do we make this grind adjustment? After we've done all that research there, we've done a little bit of testing, we then figure that out. So I know that with my temp I was getting sort of 51 grams, you were getting 59 with yours. So we're looking at sort of a 2.5 notch adjustment, which is how much I move this out anyway, so it kind of makes sense. And we want to go finer, so the best way to do this is count it out first. You go 1, 2, and counterclockwise, we're spinning this wheel around. So you notice I use that to grip, that's what gives you all the leverage to move this wheel. It's very, very tight generally. And then once you've made that adjustment, remember there's 3 shots of coffee inside here, which you'll need to get through before you do your testing again. So in the cafe, if you're getting reasonable quality results from whatever you've got in front of you, I would say just wait for those 3 shots to go through. But if it's like a really big adjustment and you think the coffee's tasting rubbish, we'd actually flush the coffee through just like that. Obviously, being a reasonably expensive product, we don't want to do this 10 times a day. So you just do this whenever you really feel you need to. Majority of the time, the most you'll have to move this is like 1.5 notches. Even when changing coffees, it doesn't really change that much. So just bear the other things in mind, like you've got coffee in there. If you haven't used the grinder for a while, it takes some time. It takes a few coffees being put through before you make a grind adjustment.
So that's the 12 3 shots through now. So
Yeah.
the grind come through next.
That's
pretty
right.
much.
And you'll notice over the next 3 shots, it's still going to be changing a little bit, then it will settle.
Yeah.
So what I want you guys to do is make that adjustment and then do the same thing, flush out 3 shots and then just test it again. Pull like maybe another 2 or 3 shots through. And if you're pretty happy with where it's at, you can leave it there and just make sure that this keypad is giving you what you want. If you need to make another follow-up adjustment, I would. But everyone should be able to do this within maybe 2 to 3 adjustments max. And that's kind of what I want you guys to do as a ballpark in a cafe. Like we should be able to do anything we want within 2 adjustments. It's 122 grams, you guys are good. That's a big, rare adjustment. I don't know how much I moved the wheel, but yeah. Matt, I would retest that just to be safe. Alright, you happy to do that? I'll give you about 10 minutes just to work through it. The cups match your colour, and you want to stack 2 rows of latte glasses as well. Once we've done that, I'll run you through what to pack down in your machine.